What would you do if saving a life meant breaking a silence that could destroy yours? When a routine emergency turned into a classified operation, I had to choose between my oath as a nurse and orders that came from somewhere far beyond the hospital walls. What I discovered that night changed everything I thought I knew about the patients we treat, the secrets we keep, and the price of truth. This is my story. The automatic doors of the emergency room burst open at 2:17 in the morning. I was finishing charting when I heard the unmistakable sound of military boots on linoleum. Two paramedics in tactical uniforms rushed in with a stretcher, and my training kicked in immediately. The patient was a young soldier, maybe 25, unconscious, with visible trauma to his chest and abdomen. But it was not the wounds that made my blood run cold. As they transferred him to our gurney, one of the paramedics leaned close to me and whispered, "Look at this." He pulled back the soldier's sleeve, revealing a series of numbers tattooed on his inner forearm, but they were partially burned, deliberately scarred over. Before I could process what I was seeing, Dr. Harrison, our head trauma surgeon, appeared out of nowhere. His voice was ice. "Nurse, step back. Do not interfere with this case." He had never spoken to me like that in 3 years. The paramedics exchanged a glance I could not read. One of them handed the doctor a sealed envelope marked with a red stamp I had never seen before. The soldier's dog tags were missing. His uniform had no unit insignia. And in that moment, standing in the fluorescent light of County General, I knew I had just seen something I was never meant to see. If this story has already grabbed you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next will surprise you even more. My name is Olivia Bennett, and I have been an emergency room nurse for 8 years. I grew up in a small town in Ohio called Millfield, where everyone knew everyone, and secrets did not exist. After nursing school in Columbus, I moved to Northern Virginia to work at County General Hospital just outside Washington. I chose emergency medicine because I loved the adrenaline, the unpredictability, the feeling that every shift mattered. I had seen gunshot wounds, car accidents, overdoses, every kind of trauma you can imagine, but I had never seen a case handled like this. I had never been ordered to step away from a patient. As I stood there, frozen, watching Dr. Harrison and 2 nurses I did not recognize wheel the soldier into Trauma Bay 3, I remembered something. 3 months ago, another military patient came in under similar circumstances. He also had no identification. He also had burns on his forearms. And he also disappeared from our system within 48 hours. No discharge papers, no transfer records, nothing. I had chalked it up to military protocol at the time. Now, standing in that hallway, I realized I had been naive. This was not protocol. This was something else entirely. Thank you for staying with me up to this point. It shows that you feel the same thing I felt when I lived through all of this. So go ahead and subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because what comes next changes everything. The rest of that shift felt like walking through fog. I kept my head down, finished my charts, checked on my other patients, but my mind would not stop racing. At 6 in the morning, when my shift ended, I walked past Trauma Bay 3. The curtains were drawn, but I could see shadows moving inside. I counted at least 6 people in there, way more than any trauma case required. As I changed in the locker room, Sarah, one of the senior nurses, came in. She looked exhausted. Without looking at me, she said quietly, "Some patients are better forgotten, Olivia. I know you are curious, but trust me on this one." My stomach dropped. How did she know I was curious? Had someone told her to warn me? I wanted to ask questions, but something in her tone made me stop. Instead, I just nodded and left. I drove home in silence, the morning sun blinding me as I headed west on Route 50. When I got to my apartment, I could not sleep. I kept seeing that soldier's face, pale and unconscious, and those burned numbers on his arm. What were they hiding? And why did everyone seem so afraid? Now I want to know from you, where are you watching this story from? Write it in the comments. It is amazing to see people from so many places following stories like this. I tried to let it go, I really did. But 3 days later, I was back at work, and the questions would not leave me alone. During my lunch break, I did something I knew I should not do. I accessed the hospital system and searched for the soldier's admission records. His name was listed as John Doe, common for unidentified patients, but the timestamp showed he arrived at 2:17 on Tuesday morning. I clicked on his chart. Access denied. I tried again. Access denied. Patient records restricted by administrative order. I had level 3 clearance. I could access almost any file in the hospital, but not this one. I logged out quickly, my hands shaking. Someone had locked down his file within hours of his arrival. Then I remembered the other patient from 3 months ago. I searched for military admissions from that time period. I found him. Same thing. warning, John Doe, access denied. But this time, I noticed something else. Both patients were admitted on a Tuesday. Both arrived between 2 and 3 in the morning. Both had the same attending physician, Dr. Harrison, and both had the same notation in their restricted files, Operation Classified, Federal Oversight. My mouth went dry. Have you ever gone through something where you had to hide the truth or stay silent, even when everything inside you was screaming to speak up? Write it in the comments. I want to know. I started seeing patterns everywhere. Over the next 2 weeks, I paid closer attention to the rhythms of the emergency room. I noticed that on certain Tuesday nights, security would increase. Extra guards would appear near the ambulance bay. Cameras that usually recorded everything would mysteriously malfunction. And always, Dr. Harrison would be there waiting. I was not the only one who noticed. During a shift change, I overheard 2 security guards talking near the vending machines. One of them said, "Another Tuesday run tonight? Keep your eyes open and your mouth shut." The other one laughed nervously and replied, "I do not get paid enough to ask questions, man." I pretended to be focused on my phone, but my heart was pounding. Tuesday runs. They had a name for it. This was not random. This was organized. That night I stayed late, claiming I needed to finish paperwork. At exactly 2:30 in the morning, the automatic doors opened. Same tactical paramedics, same unmarked stretcher, same military boots on linoleum. But this time, I was ready. I watched from a distance as they wheeled the patient, another young soldier, into Trauma Bay 3. And this time, I saw something else. One of the men in civilian clothes waiting in the hallway had a badge clipped to his belt. It was not hospital security. It was federal. Subi from a first major twist. A week later, I was walking to my car after a night shift when someone called my name. I turned around and my blood froze. It was one of the paramedics from that first night, the one who had whispered, "Look at this." He was not in uniform now. He wore jeans and a dark jacket and his face looked haunted. "We need to talk," he said quietly, glancing around the parking garage. "Not here. Meet me at the diner on Route 7 tomorrow at noon. Come alone." Before I could respond, he walked away, disappearing between the rows of cars. I stood there, frozen, my keys trembling in my hand. Every instinct told me not to go, but every fiber of my being needed answers. The next day, I drove to the diner, my stomach in knots. He was already there, sitting in a back booth, 2 cups of coffee waiting. I slid in across from him. He did not waste time. "My name is Marcus," he said. "I'm not supposed to be here. None of us are supposed to talk about what we transport, but you need to know what you are caught up in." He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Those soldiers are not coming from combat zones. They are coming from something else, something domestic, something the government does not want anyone to know about." Marcus explained everything in fragments, like he was afraid to say too much at once. The soldiers I had seen were part of a classified program, experimental, high-risk, and completely off the books. They volunteered, he said, but I do not think they understood what they were signing up for. The burns on their arms were not accidental. They were covering up identification codes, serial numbers that linked them to the program. When things went wrong, when the experiments caused complications, they were brought to hospitals like ours for emergency treatment. But the program could not risk exposure, so everything was erased, records destroyed, witnesses silenced. I felt sick. Silenced how? I asked. Marcus looked at me with something like pity, reassigned, discredited, or worse. Dr. Harrison is not just a surgeon. He is military, retired, but still contract. He coordinates the cleanups. I pushed my coffee away, my hands shaking. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you are in danger," he said flat. "They know you have been asking questions. They know you accessed restricted files. The only reason you are still working is because they are deciding what to do with you. Get out, Olivia. Quit your job. Move. Forget everything you saw." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. "I have to go. Do not try to contact me again." He stood up and walked out, leaving me alone in that booth, my entire world collapsing around me. And this is a significant expansion of your story, fleshing out the tension, the internal monologue, and the atmospheric details to move toward a more cinematic and immersive experience while maintaining your original plot points and twists. As I did not quit. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to resign, to find a quiet clinic in a seaside town where the patients were just patients and the files weren't soaked in blood. But I could not. If what Marcus had whispered in that sterile, terrifying corner of the ward was true, then these soldiers weren't just patients. They were victims of a state-sponsored nightmare. And if I walked away, if I chose the comfort of my own safety over the truth of their agony, I would be more than just a bystander. I would be complicit. But I was not stupid. I knew that in the world of shadows, a hero without evidence is just a ghost in waiting. I began a dangerous glamorous double life. By day, I was the diligent Nurse Bennett, administering meds and following protocols. By night, I was a mole in my own hospital. I started documenting everything, every anomaly, every irregular heartbeat, every off-book procedure. I tracked dates, times, names, and the recurring patterns of the military transport vans that arrived under the shroud of 3 a.m. darkness. I used my phone like a weapon. I photographed the ambulance bay during the Tuesday runs, capturing the blurred faces of men who looked more like prisoners than patients. I recorded snippets of conversations when I could, my heart hammering against my ribs so loudly I feared the microphone would pick it up. I created an encrypted container, a digital fortress for my findings, and backed it up in 3 different physical locations, hidden in places no one would think to look. I was building a case, a mountain of evidence that could not be erased by a simple system glitch, but I was also being watched. The realization didn't come all at once. It was a slow, chilling drip of awareness. It started with a black sedan, perpetually idling across from my apartment building, its windows tinted to a void-like black. Then I saw the same face in the hospital cafeteria 3 days in a row, different clothes, different tables, but those same cold, predatory eyes that never seemed to blink. My technology began to betray me. My phone started acting strange. Calls would drop in the middle of a sentence, and apps would open and close on their own as if a ghost were navigating the screen. I was not being paranoid. I was being surveilled. The pressure peaked 2 weeks after my meeting with Marcus. I was summoned to the administrative wing, a place nurses only go to be reprimanded or fired. Dr. Harrison was there, leaning against the mahogany desk with a look of feigned disappointment. Beside him stood 2 men in charcoal suits. They didn't offer names, they didn't offer handshakes. "Nurse Bennett," one of them began, his voice as dry as parchment. "We have concerns about your recent behavior. Our IT department has flagged unauthorized access to restricted files. There is also the matter of your unusual interest in classified patients." He paused, letting the silence settle like lead. "We need to know, have you shared any information with outside parties?" I kept my voice steady, though my hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists beneath the table. "I have not shared anything. I was just doing my job. I noticed discrepancies in patient care and was trying to ensure we were meeting hospital standards." The other man, the one who hadn't spoken, leaned forward. His shadow fell over me, cold and suffocating. "Your job is to follow orders, Olivia, not to ask questions, not to investigate things that are far above your pay grade. Do we have an understanding?" I looked at Harrison, seeking a spark of humanity. I found only a stone wall. I nodded. I played the part of the cowed employee, told them I understood perfectly, and walked out of that office. My skin was crawling. I knew I had just been threatened, not with a write-up or a suspension, but with something far more permanent. But I also knew something they did not. I was already 3 steps ahead. Before walking into that room, I had already sent encrypted, anonymized copies of my evidence to 3 different investigative journalists. I had attached a dead man's switch, instructions to publish the cache if I failed to check in within 48 hours. I was not going down without a fight. If they were going to destroy my life, I was going to make sure their secret burned down with it. That night, the psychological warfare turned physical. I received a text from an unknown number. No words, just an image. It was Marcus. He wasn't in his usual ward. He was in a different, grimmer hospital bed, his face a mosaic of purple bruises and jagged cuts. He had been badly beaten. The message below the photo was a chilling 4-word epitaph. "Accidents happen. Stay silent." My hands shook so violently I dropped the phone. They had hurt him because of me, because he had trusted me. This was no longer just surveillance. It was a blood warning. I spent the night huddled in the corner of my living room, the lights off, watching the black sedan through a slit in the blinds. I felt small. I felt defeated. But then, the next morning, the paradigm shifted again. I received an email at my personal account, one I had never used for hospital business. It was from a sender identifying herself as Dr. Elizabeth Cross. She claimed to be a former military physician who had worked on the very program Marcus had described, a project designed to enhance soldier resilience through illegal chemical and neurological experimentation. She wrote with a desperate urgency, claiming she had proof, hard documents, signed testimonies, and the chemical formulas they were pumping into those boys. She wanted to meet. She wanted to finish what she had started. I felt a surge of hope, but I had learned to doubt everything. I spent 4 hours at a public library, using a computer I'd never touched before to research her name. What I found chilled me to the bone. Dr. Elizabeth Cross was a real person, yes. She was a brilliant researcher, but according to every news outlet and her own obituary, she had died in a horrific car accident 6 months ago. The vehicle had veered off a bridge. There were no survivors. My heart plummeted. Whoever was contacting me was using a dead woman's identity. This was the ultimate crossroads. Was this a sophisticated trap set by the men in suits to lure me into a confession? Or was someone inside the program, someone high up, trying to expose the rot while hiding behind a ghost? I had to decide. Trust the ghost or walk away and let the darkness win. I chose to meet the ghost. I set the terms. A public park, broad daylight, right near a crowded playground where witnesses were plenty and silencers would be useless. I sat on a bench, my backpack containing the only copies of my files, my eyes scanning every face. When the figure finally approached, my breath hitched. It wasn't a stranger, it wasn't a dead woman. It was Dr. Harrison, my surgeon, the man who had presided over my interrogation, the man I believed was the architect of my misery. I bolted upright, ready to run, but he held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. Please, Olivia, just listen. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it to the park. I sat back down, every muscle in my body coiled like a spring. You're Elizabeth Cross? No, he said, taking a deep breath and looking at the children playing nearby. Elizabeth was my colleague and my friend. She was murdered because she tried to do what you're doing now. I am not who you think I am, Olivia. Yes, I coordinate the medical side of this program. I had to. It was the only way to stay close enough to the heart of it to stop it. He reached into his pocket and produced a small silver flash drive. I have been documenting everything, just like you, but I'm a marked man. Every move I make is logged. I've been waiting for someone brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to dig deep enough to give me cover, to be the external catalyst I couldn't be. I stared at him, my mind reeling in a dozen different directions. You threatened me. You stood there while those men intimidated me. And Marcus, they beat him. You let that happen. Harrison's face hardened into a mask of cold, calculated grief. I never touched Marcus. That was them, the private contractors, the people above me. I couldn't stop that without blowing my cover and losing everything we've built. And the threat in the office? I needed you to look scared. I needed those men to believe I had handled, that I had broken your spirit so they would stop looking at you. But I also knew your character. I knew that the more we pushed, the harder you would dig. I gambled on your courage, Olivia, and you delivered. He handed me the drive. Everything is on here. The real names of the financiers, the medical records of every soldier who disappeared, and the evidence of human experimentation that violates every international treaty in existence. I've been trapped in this for 5 years. I couldn't get out alone. You gave me a way out. We went public 3 weeks later. The fallout was a tidal wave. The story broke nationwide, then internationally. There were congressional hearings that lasted months. Criminal investigations stripped the masks off some of the most powerful people in the country. The program was shut down. The victims were moved to legitimate facilities, and lives were saved. But the cost was high. Just as Harrison predicted, I was the collateral damage. I lost my nursing license during the investigation. Bureaucratic retaliation for breaching patient confidentiality, even though that confidentiality was a cover for murder. Dr. Harrison disappeared into witness protection before he could even say goodbye. And Marcus survived. He's out now, but the chemicals did their work. He lives in a haze, a shadow of the man who once fought for his country. He will never be the same. As for me, I rebuilt my life far from the humid air of Virginia, far from the hospitals and the secrets. I work in a different field now, under a different name, but I carry that silver flash drive with me always. It's empty now, the data is in the hands of the world, but it serves as a reminder. It reminds me that sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything you thought you wanted, and it reminds me that even so, it is still worth it. And this was my journey, a descent into a darkness I never asked to see. Now I want to hear from you. We all like to think we are the heroes of our own stories, but reality is rarely so simple. What would you have done in my place? When your professional duty to do no harm collides with a direct order of silence from the people who sign your paychecks, how far does your courage truly go? Would you have risked your career for a patient who was already broken? Would you have trusted a man like Harrison, or would you have run? Write your thoughts in the comments. I read them all because stories like this are the only way we can prepare ourselves for the moments that question our own limits. If this story moved you or made you think, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. We share stories based on real cases that challenge everything we think we know about the world. And don't forget to watch the next recommended video on your screen. There is another story waiting for you that will leave you absolutely speechless.